I'm Dr. Catherine Rowe, a dermatologist who has spent her entire career studying how skin responds to stress, inflammation, and neglect. I never imagined I'd discover that marriage behaves the same way, concealing its infections until the damage finally surfaces. That morning, I wasn't searching for revelations, only my misplaced keys. Yet the instant I unzipped Daniel's gym bag, my attention fixed on a smooth silver tube stamped with his company's logo and secured with a handwritten note. Can't wait for tonight's trial run. LG. My hand remained steady as I stared at it the way I would at a biopsy result I already knew was malignant. Daniel entered the room mid-complaint about traffic, and when I lifted the tube and asked what it was, he replied far too quickly, calling it a new product test for work, already kicking off his shoes as if the question held no weight. I smiled with the practiced patience I reserve for patients who lie about home remedies. Interesting, I said, because just last week you told me your company doesn't deal in skincare. He shrugged, muttered something about cross-department collaboration, and disappeared into the shower. As the door closed and water began to run, I turned the tube over in my palm. The texture, the adhesive, even the batch code felt intimate, custom-made, not mass-produced. I opened it and caught a faint trace of synthetic jasmine layered with guilt. My pulse stayed calm. Medicine trains you not to recoil from rot. Tonight's trial run. 2 words that have no place near the word marriage. I returned the tube exactly where I'd found it and zipped the bag closed while Daniel's careless laughter echoed from the bathroom. It wasn't acne cream. It was proof. That evening, while he scrolled through his phone at the kitchen counter, I placed the tube beside his coffee and casually asked how the product testing had gone. He paused just a fraction too long before saying it was fine, part of a marketing study. I stirred my tea and replied evenly that the note specified tonight, not today. His eyes flashed with quick defense before he smoothed it into a smile and accused me of reading too much into things, the way he always did. I laughed softly because that's what he expected and remarked that I was merely curious what kind of trial required perfume. He shrugged, called it unisex, kissed my cheek like a period at the end of a sentence, convinced the subject was closed. I let him believe that. Some people need to think they're smarter so they'll keep talking long enough to expose themselves. When he went upstairs, I unlocked his laptop, still protected by the same password he'd never bothered to change. His inbox glowed like exposed tissue. A search led me to a folder labeled Wellness Campaign, where receipts and itineraries sat neatly beside a name I knew too well. Lena Grant. The booking confirmation read Week Wellness Retreat, Lakewood Spa Resort. Guests, Daniel Rowe and Lena Grant. My sister's name beside my husband's. I didn't gasp or flinch. It was the calm that comes right before cauterization. The next morning over breakfast, Daniel announced a work trip. I asked where while pretending to text. Aspen, he said casually, meetings and presentations. I looked up long enough to advise him to protect his skin at high altitude, a precision he didn't catch as he laughed and left. Once alone, I closed my office door, opened a blank note, and typed a single sentence. Let the trial begin. By the time he was gone, I was already at my clinic, feigning focus on patient charts while tracing every digital footprint he'd left. The lights hummed as I accessed our shared cloud storage, buried beneath folders with harmless names until I found wellness reports. Inside was confirmation for spa passes, dietary preferences, and a charge to our joint account. I printed everything, slipped it into a plain envelope, and kept my hands steady. When my assistant asked if I was okay, I told her I was reviewing a case, and after she left I whispered that people think revenge is emotional when it's really data. At lunch, I parked in a downtown garage no one noticed and logged into Daniel's work email using the same password he used everywhere. Messages between him and Lena were brief and coded, discussing timelines and launches, until one read, "The test formula is ready for the retreat. Don't forget the packaging." The irony was surgical. I downloaded everything to an external drive, a modern smoking gun. That evening, I arrived home before him, sunset turning the kitchen gold as I organized photos, receipts, and emails into a single folder labeled Truth. When Daniel walked in, loosened his tie, and kissed my temple, I smiled, commented on his stress, and mentioned how relaxing his wellness retreat sounded. He froze briefly, then laughed it off. Later, alone in the glow of my dark laptop screen, my reflection looked composed, clinical, untouched. Yet beneath it something sharper was forming, a controlled burn that would spread exactly on my terms. The plan assembled itself methodically, the way I prepare treatments, tested before applied. Standing in my clinic after hours among silent machines, I murmured about irony's chemistry as I opened the storage cabinet. I selected a clear anesthetic-based gel, harmless alone, then added pharmaceutical-grade capsaicin extract, measuring with surgical precision and stabilizing the mixture until it settled into a flawless deception. People underestimate concentration, I whispered, creating something only a dermatologist could design, safe enough to avoid permanent harm yet potent enough to make sin feel like fire. I mixed in a pigment agent commonly used in cosmetic tinting, the kind that clings to skin for days no matter how much you scrub. Under the light, the mixture shimmered softly, refined and expensive-looking, almost indulgent. I tested a single drop on a latex glove, and within seconds the surface bloomed into a pale green stain. I smiled, small and distant, the expression of someone who no longer needed validation. "You wanted excitement, Daniel," I murmured. "This one's clinically proven." I transferred the formula into an identical silver tube, sealed it carefully, and wiped the surface clean of every possible fingerprint. At home, I waited for the shower to start, letting the rush of water mask my movements. His gym bag lay open on the bed, arranged with his usual precision, predictable down to the fold of each strap. I swapped the original tube for mine, pressed the cap until it clicked, and inhaled to confirm the scent was an exact match. He would never suspect a thing. Smoothed the sheets and whispered, "Trial run accepted." When the water stopped, I stepped away, washed my hands, and studied my reflection. My face revealed nothing, calm as polished glass, composed and professional. Revenge, I decided, isn't chaos. It's preparation masquerading as control. Daniel began packing Thursday night, tossing clothes into his suitcase with the careless confidence of a man convinced he'd escaped consequence. He mentioned a marketing conference in Aspen while zipping up a black jacket heavy with arrogance. I leaned against the doorway, pretending to scroll through my phone, and repeated Aspen aloud, casually noting that his company had posted about the Denver Expo instead. He laughed too quickly, brushed it off as a small internal event, something I wouldn't understand. I smiled and agreed, already hearing how his lies now sounded like rehearsed copy. While he stepped away to double-check emails, I slipped an AirTag beneath the lining of his suitcase beside the cologne he drowned himself in. He'd never notice. Daniel believed the world was far too dull to pay attention to him. When he returned, I asked how long he'd be gone. "Just a few days," he said, still not looking up, "all business." "Of course," I replied softly, hoping the retreat would be as relaxing as he needed it to be, using his word with deliberate care. The next morning after he left, I called Lisa Carson, my lawyer and my quiet partner in reason, told her he was lying, asked if I should act. "Not yet," she said calmly. "Let him walk into it himself." I stared out at the Denver skyline catching the sun. "The fire's ready," I told her. "He just needs to light it." When Daniel came downstairs with his bag, kissed my cheek, and told me to behave, I smiled and said always, barely above a whisper. An hour later, I checked the tracker. The blinking stopped 20 minutes outside the city at a Lakewood motel. Not Aspen. Not even close. I stared until silence felt thick. "Of course," I murmured. I closed my laptop and gathered my things, not out of doubt but because I wanted to see the truth alive before it consumed itself. I parked across from the Lakewood motel, the tracker pulsing on my phone like a second heartbeat, his car sitting crooked in the lot as if even his deception lacked balance. A notification buzzed from Lena's social media. She'd gone live briefly, laughing as a man off camera told her she looked perfect under the light. I didn't need to see him. I'd listened to that voice for 18 years. I called Daniel and asked gently how Aspen was. "Cold but productive," he said, praising the team. I smiled and remarked that his conference looked warmer than expected. His pause was barely masked. "What do you mean?" he asked. I stared at the glowing motel sign and told him to take care of his skin, reminding him how fast altitude burns. Nervous laughter followed, accusing me of worrying too much. I ended the call calmly, wished him good night, told him to enjoy his trial run. 2 hours later my phone rang again, his name flashing as his voice cracked through gasps, skin burning, fire everywhere. I let the silence stretch before asking what he'd used. The cream from work, he choked. Everything burns. You always wanted excitement, I replied evenly. Consider this professional feedback. He shouted my name, but I ended the call. Minutes later another message came, panic shaking his voice, skin turning green, refusing to wash away, Lena screaming somewhere behind him. I watched paramedics rush from the motel as doors flew open under yellow lights. You wanted something new, I whispered. Now you have a story no one will forget. I drove away as sirens faded, my heartbeat finally steady. By morning, the story had escaped the motel walls, photos circulating through company chats before sunrise, Daniel and Lena wrapped in gauze, skin tinted green, captions mocking the Lakewood couple, someone joking the product worked too well. I sat at my kitchen counter sipping coffee as my phone buzzed endlessly. Lisa called, half amused, half stunned, congratulating me on creating a PR disaster for a PR rep. I told her I'd always said he'd go viral someday. That afternoon, Daniel arrived wearing long sleeves and sunglasses, stiff with humiliation, shouting that I could have killed them. I didn't raise my voice. If I'd wanted you dead, I said, you'd be a closed case in my clinic. He tore off his glasses, eyes raw, insisting they'd loved each other, accusing me of not understanding. I looked at Lena behind him, arms crossed, green stains creeping along her neck like banners. Then heal together, I said coldly. You'll have plenty of ointment for that. He tried to speak again, but I had already opened the door wider and suggested he leave before the neighbors started wondering which of them glowed brighter. His jaw tightened, and the silence said everything words no longer could. But he knew it was over. As he turned away, I added softly, next time you decide to lie, remember, some trials aren't meant to pass. Lena muttered under her breath, but I didn't need to catch it. The neighborhood would talk for weeks. The internet, even longer. I simply closed the door and let the silence finish the story for me. 2 days later, Lisa met me at her office. Her desk was stacked neatly with paperwork, radiating calm precision. Colorado is a no-fault state, she said, flipping through the folder. You don't need to prove adultery, but evidence helps. The medical reports and photos make him look unstable. You can take everything if you stay composed. I nodded, keeping my hands folded, reminding myself that cool was all I had left. She gave a faint smile. Then use it. Judges like people who don't flinch. Once the papers were filed, Daniel called repeatedly, leaving voicemails swinging between apology and accusation. You destroyed my life, he said in one message. No, I whispered as I deleted it. I just showed you what it looked like without me in it. The house stayed quiet, each corner free of his noise, even the framed certificates on the walls seeming lighter, as if the air itself had recalibrated to my rhythm. Lena disappeared from social circles first. Word spread that she'd lost her PR contracts, her wellness brand blacklisted after the public scandal. Daniel's company issued a statement distancing itself from him, and within a week, he was let go. Lisa called again just to say, congratulations. Officially divorced and debt-free. I thanked her and closed the file, staring at my reflection in the screen. No cheers, no fireworks, just the quiet satisfaction of precision completed. Revenge wasn't chaos. It was correction. Signed. Notarized. Final. Months later, the silence stopped feeling like emptiness and started sounding like peace. My mornings were my own again. No buzzing phone with false alibis, no lingering scent of his cologne at the doorway. I spent weekends hiking alone, trading noise for oxygen, and one morning, I caught myself laughing at nothing. It wasn't exactly joy, but something steadier, something earned. Daniel sent one final message. Before disappearing for good. You were right. I thought you were cold, but you were just clear. I stared at the words for a long moment before deleting them. Clarity had always been both curse and salvation. Now, it was freedom. Goodbye, Daniel, I whispered, not in anger, but in release. When people in town mention the scandal now, I smile. Every experiment teaches you something, I say, even the messy ones, and they laugh, not realizing how true it is. I didn't destroy anyone. I simply reset the equation. The house, the business, the quiet, all finally feels calibrated. Justice, I've learned, doesn't always need a gavel. Sometimes, it just needs a steady hand and the courage to let the world see what was already there. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like this aren't only about revenge, they're about reclaiming power when the world tries to take it from you. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or forced to start over, I hope you remember this. Calm doesn't mean weak, and silence doesn't mean surrender. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, leave a comment, and share where you're watching from. Your voice keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Before disappearing for good. You were right. I thought you were cold, but you were just clear. I stared at the words for a long moment before deleting them. Clarity had always been both curse and salvation. Now, it was freedom. Goodbye, Daniel, I whispered, not in anger, but in release. When people in town mention the scandal now, I smile. Every experiment teaches you something, I say, even the messy ones, and they laugh, not realizing how true it is. I didn't destroy anyone. I simply reset the equation. The house, the business, the quiet, all finally feels calibrated. Justice, I've learned, doesn't always need a gavel. Sometimes, it just needs a steady hand and the courage to let the world see what was already there. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like this aren't only about revenge, they're about reclaiming power when the world tries to take it from you. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or forced to start over, I hope you remember this. Calm doesn't mean weak, and silence doesn't mean surrender. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, leave a comment, and share where you're watching from. Your voice keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Before disappearing for good. You were right. I thought you were cold, but you were just clear. I stared at the words for a long moment before deleting them. Clarity had always been both curse and salvation. Now, it was freedom. Goodbye, Daniel, I whispered, not in anger, but in release. When people in town mention the scandal now, I smile. Every experiment teaches you something, I say, even the messy ones, and they laugh, not realizing how true it is. I didn't destroy anyone. I simply reset the equation. The house, the business, the quiet, all finally feels calibrated. Justice, I've learned, doesn't always need a gavel. Sometimes, it just needs a steady hand and the courage to let the world see what was already there. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like this aren't only about revenge, they're about reclaiming power when the world tries to take it from you. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or forced to start over, I hope you remember this. Calm doesn't mean weak, and silence doesn't mean surrender. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, leave a comment, and share where you're watching from. Your voice keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to see you in the next one. Before disappearing for good. You were right. I thought you were cold, but you were just clear. I stared at the words for a long moment before deleting them. Clarity had always been both curse and salvation. Now, it was freedom. Goodbye, Daniel, I whispered, not in anger, but in release. When people in town mention the scandal now, I smile. Every experiment teaches you something, I say, even the messy ones, and they laugh, not realizing how true it is. I didn't destroy anyone. I simply reset the equation. The house, the business, the quiet, all finally feels calibrated. Justice, I've learned, doesn't always need a gavel. Sometimes, it just needs a steady hand and the courage to let the world see what was already there. If you've stayed with me until the end, thank you. Stories like this aren't only about revenge. They're about reclaiming power when the world tries to take it from you. If you've ever been underestimated, betrayed, or forced to start over, I hope you remember this. Calm doesn't mean weak, and silence doesn't mean surrender. If this story resonated with you, subscribe, leave a comment, and share where you're watching from. Your voice keeps these stories alive, and I can't wait to see you in the next one.